Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. And not just any football. The franchise tag window closed yesterday, so we have official updates on every player that got tagged, as well as the players that will be hitting the open market. So we're going to be discussing that on top of some other updates and rumors coming from around the league. So go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Good morning, everyone. Welcome into the chat. Good morning to you, the freak. Good morning. Good morning on Instagram, on Facebook. Glad to see you all this morning. Let's go ahead and jump right on into it because, as mentioned at the top of the show, yesterday was the closing of the franchise tag window. So here are the players that were tagged, and then we'll take a second to talk about them. Michael Pittman by the Colts, Kyle Duggar by the Patriots, Antoine Winfield for the Buccaneers, Jalen Johnson for the Bears, Josh Allen on the Jaguars, not the quarterback, Justin Madubuike from the Ravens, Brian Burns on the Panthers, L'Jarius Sneed on the Chiefs, and T. Higgins, of course, on the Bengals. I do want to stress that the franchise tag is pretty unimportant in terms of what it means for the season. Last year, we had more than a few players end up getting the franchise tag and then work out some sort of deal on top of it or really kind of in lieu of it after. It's more of a way to make sure a player is on the team for the next, for this season. And then you could still trade them if you want to and trade them with the franchise tag. You could do the non-exclusive stuff. You could still work out another contract. So even though a lot of these players will or have signed the franchise tag and it will be placed on them, we don't necessarily know for sure that all of them will be back with this team next season. And we also don't necessarily know if they're even going to play on that franchise tag. But Michael Pittman is one that probably will. Michael Pittman already came out and said he would sign the franchise tag. The Colts have come out and given it to him. That's probably where we're at in that situation. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Colts and Michael Pittman. It's a ton of money for him, nearly $22 million. And then it kind of gives the Colts kind of one more season to make sure that Michael Pittman is the wide receiver that they want to invest in, on top of if Anthony Richardson is really the quarterback that they want him to be as well, because you're not really going to want to invest in a wide receiver if your quarterback position isn't figured out either. And yes, Anthony Richardson displayed a ton of ceiling when he was out there on the field last season. He did still also show the injury concerns and not get to finish the year. So this is a nice kind of buffer window for the Colts this season. I do think Michael Pittman will be playing on the franchise tag, as well as Kyle Duggar on the Patriots. I think he's kind of going to do the same thing. Really, I think a lot of these players are going to be playing on the franchise tag, but we do have rumors about L'Jarius Sneed on the Chiefs. A lot of rumors out there, especially from the Chiefs themselves, even that allowing L'Jarius Sneed to kind of find a trade partner out there. They're allowing him to seek a trade. And there's also rumors now that the Bengals are also still working on trading T. Higgins as well, even with this franchise tag. And then Antoine Winfield, we talked about a bit about yesterday. He's on the franchise tag now, but this was more of a way to make sure he stays on the team so they don't have to accrue any dead money. And then they can negotiate the contract. They want to pay him even more than the franchise tag does. And they want to work out an interesting contract on that situation because they still have a couple players to bring back. Baker Mayfield and Levante David are the only two now after signing Mike Evans and franchise tagging Antoine Winfield. They can do some crazy stuff with contracts to free up some money, even if they do technically pay Antoine Winfield more money. So that's kind of the franchise tag situation as a whole. We don't need to go too much detail on the defensive side of the ball, but Michael Pittman on the Colts one more season and likely, for the rest of his career. I think that the Colts want him there and he wants to be there. And I do think Anthony Richardson is, of course, the franchise quarterback. So I think just after this season of them kind of proving all that, then we'll see the massive contract go Michael Pittman's way and all of that. But I do just want everyone to keep their eye on T. Higgins for sure. And your Bengals wide receivers there. Reports coming out now that Joe Burrow really, really likes Andre Iosivas, which I know he's not necessarily a T. Higgins, but with their kind of cap situation right now in Cincinnati, something's going to have to give. We expect Tyler Boyd to be leaving, but it's possible Joe Mixon leaves as well. And with rumors out there that they're still looking to move T. Higgins in some fashion is very, very interesting. So still go stash or Andre Iosivas's and Charlie Jones's of the world, which then will bring us to the free agents. So these are the players that it was kind of questioned if they would be franchise tagged, and they are not. So that's Saquon Barkley, Calvin Ridley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Baker Mayfield. So let's just take a second with each of these players as they are fantasy football relevant and kind of what we know about the situation right now with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, we know now as a free agent, didn't want to be in New York. I mean, we've been talking about it for weeks now. We knew he was going to be a free agent. We never really thought for a second that he was going to be back in New York. I think that bridge was burned really from both sides. And so it becomes, where really does Saquon Barkley want to go? I mean, he's going to be able to choose, and he's the type of athlete that's really going to be able to get the best, right? Like he's the best running back on the market now. I know Derrick Henry's out there. I know Austin Eckler's out there. And I know that even Alvin Kamara could end up in this free agent market. But Saquon Barkley is easily the best running back available. And he's already come out and said that he wants to play for the Houston Texans. So that's probably what's going to happen. The Houston Texans have top 5 cap space right now, even after signing Dalton Schultz, which we'll talk about in a bit. Houston Texans is definitely where Saquon Barkley's going. I know I can't say definitely, but that's where he's going. Let's be honest here. That's where he wants to go. The Texans could use him a ton. It's a beautiful landing spot. It makes a ton of sense, and it's going to be really, really special when it happens. So I really do suggest go ahead and trade for Saquon Barkley if you can. I'm trying to tier down from like Travis Etienne, for example, or really any running back. I would tier down and try to get Saquon plus, because I think when the points start coming in, Saquon's still going to be a top 5 running back on a points per game basis. And probably even better than that, to be completely honest, especially if he ends up on the Texans. So Saquon's a guy I'm heavily targeting right now. I am very, very much expecting him to go to Houston. That's the betting favorite right now, on top of Saquon coming out and saying that's where he wants to play and the Texans having all that money. I think that's what's going to happen. But as someone points out in the chat, M-Lad, Philly would be nice for Barkley. That's true. That could be fine. I just don't know if he necessarily wants to. He might want to stay in the East just to kind of stick it to the Giants. So I guess we'll see. But right now, I'm thinking Texans with a 99% certainty. The next player that's a free agent is Calvin Ridley. And this is interesting. It could still develop. But one of the things we know about the Calvin Ridley situation is if he is on the Jaguars next season, they do have to give up a second-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons. And so I don't think it's going to happen in terms of Calvin Ridley returning to the Jaguars. It could happen, especially if they find themselves needing a wide receiver and not really having an option. They could just go ahead and bring back Calvin Ridley. But I don't think he did enough for them to want to give up a second-round pick, to be completely honest with you, on top of having to sign him to a contract. So I think Calvin Ridley's going to be somewhere else next season. Not sure where. We'll have to figure that out for sure. Maybe let's go ahead and look into some odds. Let's see, Calvin Ridley next team odds. Probably should have done that before the show, right? Let's see, covers.com. Nope, wrong one. I see the Falcons is a talking one right now. The Falcons could definitely be interesting. They have the money. I actually can't really find any next team odds on Calvin Ridley. So we'll see what happens with Calvin Ridley. I don't think he's going to demand that much money. That's why he didn't get franchise tag to begin with, on top of the Jaguars needing to give up a second-round pick if he returned. So just look for Calvin Ridley to be on the open market. And I would probably say I'm not going to be too excited about anywhere he goes. And now that I've thought about it some more and talked a bit some more, I think the Panthers is where my head has gone. My head has drawn Calvin Ridley to the Panthers. We know that they're heavily invested in getting a wide receiver upgrade, and staying in the NFC, or not staying, returning to the NFC South makes a little bit of sense. He fits into that offense a good bit. So I think that could be a potential one right there. The Panthers is where my head has now gone the more and more I've thought about it. Bears is interesting too, but I just think the Bears, especially since they're keeping DJ Moore, I really do think the Bears are going quarterback, wide receiver with their 2 first-round picks. So I don't know about Bears for that one. I know there are other teams, right? Texans, I think, is also in the wide receiver market, but I don't really know why. I think Nico Collins and Tank Dell are fine. Either way. Josh Jacobs is another player that's going to be hitting free agency, although I think he's going to return to Oakland, or gosh, wow. I think he's going to return to Vegas. I think Josh Jacobs will be returning to Vegas. I think he wants to be there. I think the team wants him there. I just don't think they wanted to franchise tag him, because they would have had to pay a little extra, because it would have been a double franchise tag situation. And basically the same situation here with Tony Pollard. It's looking like the Cowboys are still the favorite for Tony Pollard to return to. They just kind of have to work out a contract, and they felt he wasn't necessarily worth the franchise tag amount, which is totally fair for both of these running backs. I think they're worth right around it, but not quite the franchise tag. And also, I think both of those running backs have done enough to earn a contract, even if it's 2-3 seasons. I think they deserve more than just a 1-year contract on the franchise tag. But Tony Pollard probably returning to the Cowboys. Josh Jacobs probably returning to the Raiders. I will say with Tony Pollard, I do still think the Cowboys will be exploring whether it be free agency or bringing in a running back in the draft. They have shown time and time again now that Tony Pollard is not a bell cow back on this team, as explosive as he is. And there will be someone getting snaps. I really don't think it's going to be Rico Dowdle again. I think there will be someone else coming in. And Baker Mayfield is kind of the last big free agent now. I ultimately think he's going to return to Tampa Bay, and we'll talk about that in a bit, in a little bit. I guess we can go ahead and start talking about it. We'll go ahead and move on, I guess, and this will work itself together. Baker Mayfield, I think, is returning to the Buccaneers because more details have come out about Mike Evans' contract. Mike Evans' contract, while it was reported as a $52 million 2-year contract, the details are now fully out. So it's $20.5 million essentially annually and $41 million in base salary. The only way he reaches that $52 million is if the Buccaneers win the Super Bowl. Yes, that's the incentive. It has nothing to do with Mike Evans' personal performance. It has to do with the team. So if the Buccaneers win a Super Bowl, he's making a lot more money. But as things stand, his contract, especially this season, is not really counting towards the cap that much at all. And they've done the classic front office move, adding a void year to the contract in 2026. So he signed 2024, 2025, but he's also making money in 2026 to make their cap situation work. So Mike Evans, while this is a big contract, you can go check Spotrac, you can go check over the cap. He's only counting $5.5 million towards the salary cap this season on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then like 20 something the next year, then like 15 to 16 the next year, even though he's not actually technically on the team. So that's why earlier when we talked about Antoine Winfield getting franchise tagged, right now things are a little dicey for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right now, after franchise tagging Antoine Winfield, they have about $20.5 million of cap space. That is a lot of money, but it's not quite enough to get Baker Mayfield signed unless he wants to do another contract similar to Mike Evans, where it's not necessarily front-loaded. It's more so a back-loaded contract, which is possible. And that's why we talk about Antoine Winfield. As we just mentioned, he is not expected to play or continue on the franchise tag. Tons of reports out there from the Buccaneers themselves that they want to sign Antoine Winfield to an actual contract. And so if they could also make it sort of interesting in the way that Mike Evans has, then you're talking about even more cap space freeing up with signing Antoine Winfield, with probably also getting back Levante David. So I think ultimately Baker Mayfield's going to be back on the Buccaneers too, but we have to wait for the Antoine Winfield contract to get sorted out. And we kind of have to wait to see what Baker Mayfield does on the open market. I think Baker will probably test and meet with other teams. I think it's going to be a month and a half to 2-month process. But ultimately, he's going to return to Tampa Bay. I think that Mike Evans coming back is kind of the big domino to fall in terms of that. But also the fact they have $20.5 million right now, the fact that they finagled a weird contract with Mike Evans, they'll probably do the same with Winfield, and they'll probably do the same with Baker Mayfield, and they'll probably do the same with Levante David, which is why we stress cap space means nothing. NFL teams figure it out. And for the most part, it is the least entertaining option that happens in the NFL, which brings us to the Kirk Cousins update. Kirk Cousins update out there right now. This is actually pretty important, but will definitely add some haste, if you will. The Vikings have until March 13th to re-sign Kirk Cousins, or else they will incur $28.5 million in dead cap. That's a lot of money to just lose. And so I think we'll find out what happens with Kirk Cousins within the week. They have until March 13th. I don't think that the Vikings are going to let that dead cap hit. If you guys know me, if you've listened to the show, I still firmly believe he returns to the Vikings. But this does make me a little more nervous. You know, this moves me from 100% certainty down to like an 85-90% certainty, just because they might just, move on and let someone else do it, as reports are now coming out that the Falcons, while also being interested in Justin Fields, and I think that's ultimately what's going to happen here, the Falcons are waiting in the wings because Kirk Cousins is their first choice. And they have a reported massive offer waiting for Kirk Cousins to hit free agency if he does on March 13th. But I do think with the Vikings taking a $28.5 million dead cap hit on March 13th if they don't re-sign him, leads me to believe that they will definitely be re-signing him. I don't think they want that big of dead cap. I, again, think that Kirk Cousins wants to play for Minnesota. And I, again, really think the Vikings want Kirk Cousins to play for Minnesota. I just think that it's a weird situation. And they're not quite lining up, and we'll see, right? But I'm actually surprised, to be completely honest with you, that the Falcons are waiting in the wings with a massive offer for Kirk Cousins. I really didn't think the market would be too crazy hot for him, given his age and coming off of an Achilles. But I mean, he's a really, really good quarterback, and he's done a lot for a lot of teams, and he would definitely fit within this Sean McVay system. That's literally the Kevin O'Connell system's the Sean McVay system. The Zach Robinson in Atlanta is basically going to be the Sean McVay system as well. So I understand wanting to get Kirk Cousins if you're the Falcons. I would just let the Vikings get it, not incur the risk, especially since you're really just a quarterback away. And I know Kirk Cousins is one of those quarterback away kind of pieces, but I think there are other options out there, and I'm still going to be a Justin Fields defender and a hoper, if you will, for the Falcons. But either way, we're going to find out what happens with Kirk Cousins probably by March 13th, but March 13th at the latest. So make sure you keep tuning into Wake It Take. Which now leads us to the last bit of news, and it's just stuff, right? We're into stuff land. Yeah, this is just less exciting. I understand if you don't want to hang around. Here we go. The rest of the topics are tight ends. We're going to be talking about a lot of tight end stuff. A lot of tight end situations have happened within the last 24 hours, starting with Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz has signed a contract with the Houston Texans, 3 years, $36 million, $23.5 million guaranteed. Decent contract for him. Good for him. Good for the Texans. They needed to keep a tight end. They were probably going to keep Dalton Schultz this whole time, and they have him. There's their tight end. Now they have Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, Tank Dell, and I think they'll probably add a wide receiver in the draft. Some think they'll add one in free agency. Either way, there probably is one more piece coming in, and Saquon Barkley, of course. So this Texans team looking really, really good, and I think this is a solid signing. Dalton Schultz, he's just a guy who always produces. Even if it's not the top of the ceiling type stuff, it's still really, really good games from him, and I think he does fit on this team really well. Excited to see year 2. Now, Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is a tight end that was released by the Falcons just a few weeks ago. And yesterday, he visited with the Miami Dolphins. And Adam Schefter has reported that they're already working on a contract between the two players, or between the two sides, which I think is very interesting. We saw last season that the tight end position was something the Dolphins were desperately missing. They had a guy, his name is slipping my mind right now, but he was often injured, rarely caught the ball. When he did, it was like a touchdown if he did, but it was rare. He was not often on the field, and he had a couple big games, but I think an actual good tight end like Jonnu Smith, I mean, he still obviously has some moxie, if you will, given how well he played for the Falcons last season, given some of his big chunk plays he showed. And I think on the Dolphins, he could fit really, really well with his size and speed combination. I think that's a lethal combo. He's not ever going to get a ton of targets, right? I mean, probably still 4 or 5 a game, but that's plenty on that offense. So I would say if Jonnu Smith is available in any of your leagues, this might not happen, right? I mean, they're just negotiating and he just met. But if it happens, we're talking about a pretty big spike in fantasy football value. So if he's available on any of your leagues, especially tight end premium, go pick up some Jonnu Smith and see what happens. And then another tight end update, unfortunate for sure. Hayden Hurst will be released by the Carolina Panthers. This comes after last year he had the concussion, which kind of turned into, I don't remember the medical term, but some sort of like amnesia type deal was going on with him after the concussion. And he was having, he just couldn't really get medically cleared. He was only able to halfway practice. And as far as I was aware from what I researched, there's no true recovery for the injury he sustained. And it was very, very scary. And it seems he has not recovered from it yet. I would assume that's how I'm going to read between the lines. There's not much information out there. And I'm sure if it is this head injury that we picked up last season that kind of held him out, that has led to his release, the fact that there isn't much information out there makes a ton of sense. as the NFL probably wants to keep that hush-hush as much as possible, given the kind of state of things around the CTE and all of that. So my heart goes out to Hayden Hurst. He had a couple good games last season on the Panthers, a couple good games on the Bengals, a couple good games on the Falcons, a few good games on the Ravens. I mean, he was a solid tight end throughout his career. I doubt another team's really going to take a chance on him. It's really unfortunate that he has to end his career probably this way. I guess it's just a release, but again, with that injury, how scary it was, I don't know what the next step is. I hope he can make it back out there, but I'm not so certain, especially since, I mean, the Panthers is probably like the one team, right, that would probably just keep Hayden Hurst because they need a tight end. They need anyone who can catch a football. And so the Panthers releasing him, I think, is a really, really bad sign for his health, which is super unfortunate. Heart goes out to him and wish him the best in the rest of his career and whatever he chooses to do next. The next tight end update we have for you, and the last tight end update, another tight end is being released, and his name is Willdley. Willdley is going to be released by the Seattle Seahawks, believe it or not. He will no longer be a vulture and random person that you stream at tight end because he randomly catches the ball every once in a while. The Seahawks are releasing him and saving $7 million. And this is very interesting. I know this is Willdley that we're talking about. The Seahawks, to my knowledge now, don't have a tight end on the roster. Noah Fant is a free agent. Colby Parkinson is a free agent, so there might have been a fourth guy on there. But there's no one. There's no one. And so I think, and if you tuned in last season to Wake and Take, for some reason, I have a gut feeling about Colby Parkinson. I know I just said he's a free agent, but he hasn't done anything. So I think he'll probably re-sign pretty cheap. And I think he might be the starting tight end. I think Colby Parkinson's season may finally be upon us. I don't know. I don't know why. I've always had this gut weird feeling about Colby Parkinson. I don't know if it's the long hair. He's 6'7", 250 pounds, has average athleticism if you go look at his profile. But he just like consistently, like every game has a catch or two catches or three catches or scores a touchdown. And he's done that his whole career for some reason. And like he's never had a big ceiling game, but especially at the tight end position where a player just randomly becomes really, really good after a few seasons. Colby Parkinson is a guy that when you watch him, he looks like a starting tight end. Like, go look at Colby Parkinson on the field. You see the long hair. You see the build. It's like, that's a tight end right there. And so I think he's going to be back in Seattle pretty cheap and could be interesting. I'm sure they'll draft someone, but they're not really going to be able to push for legitimate snaps on a guy who's been on the team for a while and been in the league for a while. So we'll see what happens with Seattle. I mean, I doubt that they take their high draft picks to get a tight end either. So they're going to have to bring someone in free agency, no matter what, probably. I think Colby Parkinson probably resigns, and I can't really back it up too much other than a gut feeling. But Colby Parkinson, go get him. Go get some Colby Parkinson, guys. Cool. That seems to be it for all the news. But it looks like we have a few questions that we'll go ahead and get into. How do you feel about Tai Chandler now that Madison is gone? I mean, I think it's good news that Madison is gone. And there are also reports that they like Tai Chandler a lot, that they like what they have in him. Matthew Berry reported that he heard that at the Combine. But I do firmly believe that the Vikings will be bringing in someone else. I don't find myself believing that Tai Chandler will be a bell cow. I think he'll still be a really good running back, and I think he's probably a flex piece. But I would probably look to sell him right now while the value is the highest, and then maybe look to get him again later in the season or something, as he does still have a really, really good profile. But this draft class, especially at the running back position, is very, very deep. There's a lot of good talent that's going to be available late. And I think the Vikings are gonna get one of those guys. We saw it last year. They took Dwayne. Well, they did take Dwayne. No, they did. They took Dwayne McBride at the end of the 7th round or something. They're going to take a shot on a running back again. And I think this time they'll actually hit. So I think we're going to be talking about a backfield split in Minnesota next season, not necessarily a Tai Chandler bell cow situation. I would be very, very shocked if that happens. So I would probably look to sell Tai Chandler right now. He's definitely taken a bump in value, and I don't know if it's the time yet. So either way, that's what I think about that. And I don't see any other questions unless there's some on Instagram. Let's see. No, but someone on Instagram, Original Funko Toronto, says the Bengals will be drafting a tight end. I love that. I hope they can get Brock Bowers if he stays around that late. That would be crazy and special if that landing spot happened. But that looks to do it, everyone. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in. You guys are a fantastic audience, and this was another fun episode of the Wake and Take I hope to see you all tomorrow on the Player Profiler YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at 10 a.m. Eastern. Go ahead and hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to Player Profiler on your way out. Have a wonderful Wednesday and a fantastic rest of your week. Peace.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.